Welcome, everyone. This is Bob Jakowski with Upturn Advisors. It's a pleasure to have you join us today on today's webinar. Our topic today is how to create significant demand for your solutions and services. We talk to lots of CEOs, business owners every day, and what's top of mind for most executives that we're talking to is how do they prepare for the upturn? How do they jumpstart their demand, their sales, their revenue for their company? And that's really what we want to focus on today, is give you some best practices and really talk about how do you build or perhaps rebuild your revenue growth engine for your company going forward in 2020. As with any high performance engine, you're looking at what are the attributes: speed, power, flexibility, acceleration. So we're going to talk about how do you build the right components, because revenue growth, revenue acceleration, the revenue creation process is truly a process. And when you think about a process, it's connected. It's connected across lots of different functions within your company today. That can include marketing, it can include sales, business development, working with partners, working with your sales organization. And so there are a lot of different facets involved here. Needless to say, we've been doing this for many years, and we've been looking at how to help you as an executive think through the right decisions, make the right decisions, so that you don't waste time and money. So thank you for joining us today. What we're going to do today also is we're going to execute several polls, get your response, share the results with everybody joining today's webinar. We're also going to open it up for questions. So if you have any specific questions as we go throughout today, and we're going to share some very valuable information, insights, and information that we're going to send to you after today's webinar so that you can put some of these best practices in place today. So again, thanks for joining us today. We welcome your participation. We welcome your attendance. Myself and Craig Remy are going to be presenting today, and we co-founded this company, revenue acceleration firm. Really, it's going on almost 12 years now. It says 11 years here, but going on 12. And we have a mission, and the mission is to help executives like yourself figure out in the B2B area how you're going to scale and grow revenue. How do you do that in a demonstrable way? How do you do it so it's predictable, consistent, and capital efficient? Myself, I've been CEO for both public and private companies in Silicon Valley. I've built 10 companies at different stages. And so it's really incredible to see what can be done in terms of building the right execution and the right outcomes for your company. Craig is going to be talking today on a number of these best practices. And Craig, before we founded this company, was a serial CMO, running chief marketing officer, running a number of very successful technology and services companies in Silicon Valley. And before that, he has tremendous experience branding with some of the largest companies that you would recognize out there today, such as Google, Nike, Levi Strauss, and many more companies. So together, we bring a lot of serial expertise. We've worked with over 300 B2B companies and their management teams. So what we share today is something that we've been perfecting and iterating on for the past 11, 12 years. And we want to bring those best practices to you today because time is of the essence. As we expect the upturn to happen quickly this year, we want to make sure that you have all the right tools and assets and best practices in place. Okay, so let's start with the survey. What, from your perspective, is the most pressing matter as your company gets back to business? And I'm going to go ahead and execute the poll and ask for your participation. So here are some of the choices. Really, it's the most pressing matter is making up for lost time and missed revenue opportunities. Number one would be restarting your demand for your solutions and services. A third is getting your sales cycles unstuck. So as you've gone into this year and then the coronavirus outbreak hit, many companies, some of those really important sales cycles to get stuck. A third or fourth area is making your solutions a must-have. So we work with a lot of companies that have what I would call nice-to-have solutions, but when you go through difficult times, the downturn of the economy, sometimes those solutions don't get shortlisted, if you will, and get selected. And then finally, one of the things that we look at is tying marketing investments into sales outcomes. So go ahead and if you could participate, give us your input here. Everything's valuable. We find your input is just extremely valuable, and it's great to share this with the audience. Okay, so let me go ahead and just a couple more responses here. So we got quite a few people responding today, so this is great. And let me go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you. Okay, so only 4% of you stated that your most pressing matter is making up for lost time in missed revenue. 38% stated that it's restarting your demand for your solutions and services, which is just totally aligned with what we're going to be talking about today. 17% stated that you'd like to get your sales cycles unstuck. The second area that's most important is talking about how to get your solutions to become a must-have. So I've always found that to be interesting because when you think about selling to, let's say, other enterprises, you're looking at 30 different solutions across different functional areas. And the question always gets down to is, how do you make sure that your solution is at the top of the list? And then finally, 8% of you stated that it's important to tie marketing investments into sales outcomes. So good. Thank you very much for your participation. We appreciate that. And we'll have another poll coming up here shortly. A friend of mine, Rick Page, that I worked with, wrote this book. And I think it's probably one of the best titles I've ever heard, which is Hope is Not a Strategy. And when I worked with Rick, we were scaling a company in Atlanta, Georgia, which actually became a public company and became Dun & Bradstreet Software. But it was great to understand that, you know, when you think about this, intentionality matters. So when you're thinking about what do you want to accomplish in 2020, it's about thinking through and saying, these are the goals that we have. These are the customers that we want. This is the profitability that we're looking for. This is the organization that's going to help us scale. And these are the best practices that we can put in place that are really going to give us a winning system, not just winning people. And so Hope is Not a Strategy is really a great read. And but the best of all, I think, is the title, which is, as you think about this year, as you think about what you want to accomplish, we want to talk about intentionally putting in the revenue growth engine that gets you there, that gets you the type of outcomes you're looking for. When Craig and I were at Intact is a software as a service company focused on providing accounting solutions, on-demand accounting solutions. We just we're looking at what's the right way to scale revenue. And we actually created this revenue acceleration map back about 15 years ago. And we've perfected it ever since. What we realized is that what you need is not another marketing gambit, not another lead generation firm. What you really need is a complete system that's integrated that allows you to scale revenue and do that regardless of the size company that you're at. So whether you're talking about being at a large company like Google, or you're a small startup company, having a system that's going to allow you to create revenue growth and accelerate your growth from year to year is really important. So everybody that's attending today is going to receive a copy of this revenue acceleration map. We're going to discuss some of the key takeaways of putting this engine in place, because the map leads to the engine. And let's go ahead and look at this. 3 funnels. A lot of companies, in fact, every company we've ever seen has a CRM system in place today. But what some companies do or do not have a marketing automation system in place. in front of that. So that's the infrastructure. What we do, though, is we take a look at your prospects that you have in your company, and we distribute them across 3 different areas. So the first funnel is your marketing funnel. That's where you're creating your demand. That's really how you get the flywheel going. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. The second funnel is your lead management funnel. These are key stakeholders, key individuals in your target audience that have expressed interest in your solutions and services, but they're not ready necessarily to go through the sales cycle with you or the buying process. And of course, the final funnel is your sales funnel. And that's where you collaborate with your customers, with your partners, with your buyer out there, and really help them through the buyer's journey, help them navigate that and become a customer. Now, as you can see, we've created some math here that underlines this. So if we want to get $5 million, as an example, in the door this year as far as revenue, we know what we have to create. And this is great because there is no guesswork anymore. This is really a statistically relevant model in terms of how you create the growth you're looking for. So in this case, if your average transaction is $50,000, you know you're going to have to create 100 of those transactions. And everybody on this call, I'm sure, understands what your conversion rate is of the sales opportunity to a close. In this case, it's 25%. Companies typically aren't doing with great rigor is creating the 2 funnels in the front of this. So the first funnel is, what are the offers? What's the engagement that you're going to have to create interest in your company? And what we can see from this math here, we need to create 330 interested offers. Those are decision makers, influencers in your target audience that are raising their hand and expressing interest in your company. That interest needs to be converted in the middle funnel from what we call market qualified lead to a sales qualified lead. And one of the most important things that we do at our company is think about how do we actually help your buyer become a sales qualified lead. What ends up happening for a lot of companies is on B2B, only 10% of people that express interest are really sales ready. So that means 90% are not. So that means that we need to collaborate with our buyer and give them the tools, the knowledge, give our champions what they're looking for so that they can actually drive through this process together and be a customer. So this is really about jump-starting your demand. We understand what needs to get done. Now the question is, how do we do it? So once you put in this engine that we're going to be talking about today, as an executive, as a contributor at your company, you're really looking for a couple of key benefits. One is visibility. I have to admit, as a public CEO, when I would go to the board meetings, I always got the same 2 questions. Question 1 is, how do we do this quarter? And we did phenomenal. The question 2 would be, how does next quarter look? So when we talk about putting in this engine, it's about creating the type of visibility that you're going to need for the next couple of quarters so you truly understand what's next. How do you get that visibility so you have confidence and you understand exactly what's going to happen next quarter and the following quarter. It's predictability, it's insight. And when I talk about insight, we always look at what's working, what's not working. When we try different things out, let's say we try a new offer. Let's say that's a thought leadership ebook that you're going to create, or we're going to create with you, and you're going to provide it to your target audience. Let's say it's a process infographic about what the optimized state's going to look like with your service for that company. We're going to be looking at that and see how does that work? What's the response? What's the conversion rate that happens with that? And the ROI. It's really important as you look at this. One of our customers for a $35 million company came to us, and Jeff said, "Hey Bob, I'm spending $500,000 on marketing every year, and I just don't understand how this investment that I'm making in marketing is turning into sales outcomes. So could you help me connect the dots here?" And that's what we're going to be talking about today. And then finally, efficiency. No matter how small or large you are, it's so easy for us to become funnels or silos when we're thinking about sales is doing their thing, marketing is doing their thing, business development or strategic alliances is doing their thing. But the truth is, they all need to be connected together. So today what we're going to do is talk about these 7 best practices. And Craig and I are going to walk you through this. So how do you create your revenue growth engine? Now, the important thing about this that we look at is you can go hire a incredible CSO, Chief Sales Officer, or you can go hire an incredible VP of Marketing. But what you don't want to have happen is you don't want to be in a situation when that person leaves the company, those best practices walk out the door with that. So as you're building your company, you want transparency. You want to be able to say, I'm putting this engine in place, and every component of the engine and how it's going to work, how it's going to scale. To me, when you add great people to that winning system, you really are now in a position to scale. And that's the important thing. So we're going to walk you through these 7 best practices. We're going to talk about how you can put them in practice today. And then we're also going to offer everybody that's joining us on today's webinar an opportunity later after today's webinar to see a specific customer example if you have specific interest. With that, now I'm going to turn it over to Craig.
Perfect. Thank you, Bob. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. Perfect. So looking back at the poll that Bob asked earlier, the 2 highest rated answers were restarting your demand for your solutions. That was 38%. And 33% of you said make our solutions a must-have. Okay, seems simple enough, especially in this really trying times. So how are we going to do that? And this actually goes to some of the fundamental cores of marketing. And we're going to talk about how you're going to convert your buyer content into seller content. And if you do this correctly, and there is a very, very specific process you go through, it is not extremely difficult, but Bob and I have done this hundreds of times, and we have perfected it. When you talk to us offline, we'll go through the process with you. But what we're going to talk about now is what exactly is seller content, what exactly is buyer content. And I would, without looking at some of the specifics out there, I would say that probably all of your websites out there are probably focused on the buyer content. And what you need to do is focus on the seller content. And the issue is, what are they looking for? What are the triggers out there that are going to elicit a response from them? It's not about you. It's not about your solution being the hero solution. It's about what are the challenges they're facing today, and how are you going to fill that challenge for them and make this really into a no-brainer, eliminating the risk to move forward. So let's look at how we do that. We go the process of very specifically creating surveys for the audience. We start with who the audience is you're talking to, who the stakeholder is, and we construct a very comprehensive survey to the market. And you'd say, well, that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to create a survey myself. I'll just, right after this webinar, I'm going to go create a survey. But creating questions for a survey is in of itself an art form. And just look at the political landscape out there. When you ask questions regardless of your political affiliation, you ask questions out there, you're going to get specific answers that are conformed to the question you present. And Bob and I have worked this hundreds of times, and we've avoided the pitfall that will get you into a biased answer. Now, creating the questions is one issue, and that's what you see here. These are some of the challenges you're going to have to present in your survey. And our surveys are very comprehensive. They're going to be probably 100, 125 core questions, and it will take the responder 20 or so minutes to complete these surveys. And so here's some of the dimensions that we're going to go through. So we're going to find out what are the pains that they're experiencing relative to what you're offering in the market, and how your solution is going to solve those pains. And specifically when we're talking about pains, we're going to be asking them on any given solution, any given market, we're going to be asking 25 or so different pain questions to understand what are the top 5 pains. Now we can say, well, I know what the top 5 pains are, but unfortunately, and I will be very blunt about this, that's a very myopic position. And time again that Bob and I have done this is when we present the results, the CEOs that we results to say, my gosh, this is completely opposite than what I was expecting. And we then pivot the messaging based on the survey results, and the sales, the results will actually improve for those particular companies. Now, let's talk about some of the other dimensions we're going to test. We're going to talk about decision drivers. So companies don't just wake up one day and say, hey, I want a new solution. Hey, I want a new service. Something's happened. Something has specifically happened to their business, something specifically happened to their marketplace, and they need to elicit a change. So the challenge is, how do we identify what are those core and top decision drivers that are making those actions really happen? We're going to talk about value propositions to the audience. And again, just as we talked about 25 or so different pains, we're going to test 25 or so different value propositions to identify really the top 5 that are resonating with the audience. And I'll give you another example. A customer of ours, AvidXchange, they were a $6 million company when they engaged with us. And when we created the results, or created the surveys and presented the results to the CEO, the team, especially the CEO, was flabbergasted that his top value proposition that he was going to market with was actually rated last in the survey results. And so we completely changed up the messaging for the company and how they were going to market. And today, or actually I'd say 2 years ago, Bain Capital invested $250 million into AvidXchange for growth. And AvidXchange is on an absolute tear in the marketplace based on the strategy we put in place with them. We're going to ask questions on engagement and what is the ongoing conversation we should have with the audience. You know, as we think about the whole conversation, the storytelling, the narrative that you're presenting out there to elicit responses, there is a approach that we need to take, and we need to understand from their standpoint, what are the different ways in which they want to engage. We're going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about the buying process. We're going to ask questions around functionality, you know, your roadmap, your potential for growth out there for your solution, and what will potentially resonate with the audience. And we're going to talk about things such as competition and influencers, dimensions that are critical in making a decision on how you're going to go to market. Now, asking the questions is one thing. Getting the results and analyzing them and making them into actionable initiatives is really where the magic happens. And Bob and I have done this hundreds of times, and there is a very specific process to analyzing the data, the raw data, and then presenting a solution and go-to-market strategy for you related to the actual survey results. And just as the title here says, cracking the code, it really is. You're looking at raw data and you're saying, well, what am I going to do with that? And that's where you're going to need a company like On-Demand Advisors to help you understand that. Let's go to the next slide. I'm going to talk to you about another part of this. So now you're going to have as we talked about the buyer survey, we're going to then create the messaging strategy from that. That's item 2 here. And then we're going to be creating other dimensions, the core messages, as we call them, for the company position, the vertical position of the company, whether you have multiple verticals, and the top value propositions for each one of those verticals. Then, and only then, will you create the multitude of content that you're going to use to communicate your story to the audience, whether those are ebooks, videos, infographics, webinars, and so forth. The problem that companies get into, and I'm going to be again very blunt, is they here with number 3 and say, I have a great message. I'm going to start getting some ebooks. I know exactly what the audience is. And the problem is it doesn't resonate. And now you wasted all the time and the money to both create that content and to push it out to the marketplace. And as you look at your marketing budget, and marketing will be the biggest expense you're going to have in your go-to-market strategy, 85% of your marketing budget, and I have run many multi-million-dollar budgets. 85% of that is going to be in your demand creation. It's going to be in your campaigns. Now, if you're putting out content and messages that effectively waste 85% of your marketing budget, it's flat out foolish. And so by doing this front end work that we're talking about and really understanding the buyer messaging and really understanding what the core messages are and how you're going to present those to the audience, you're going to save yourself, number 1, headache. Number 2, you're going to have far better penetration into the market. And number 3, you're going to grow faster. Let's go to the next slide and talk about our second point here. All right, so now there is another dimension in marketing and sales that is somewhat, some people think of it as plumbing and they need it, but they don't really utilize it. And as we've implemented Pardot, Salesforce, HubSpot, a number of marketing automation systems for years now, and we're experts at this. And as we talk to HubSpot, and we have direct contact with people at HubSpot and Pardot and Salesforce, they will say that 90% of their users just use their marketing automation for an email engine, and that's foolish. Absolutely foolish, because you're basically using a very expensive system, and these are expensive systems, very powerful systems for just what is effectively sending out emails. The power of a system like this is going to be in tracking those leads, understanding their behavior, understanding how you can elicit change, looking at the results in a concerted way so that you can, in fact, make modifications to your behavior and capitalize on what they're doing with respect to interacting with you, as well as how they're going to be moving through the sales cycle and how your sales team is going to be interacting with them. So when you look at your marketing automation system, look at it as your core system of record, and it starts there. This goes well beyond your email sending. It starts to become a very tentacled system that has a tremendous amount of intelligence buried within it. And unlocking that intelligence is something that we do, and would be happy to talk to you about that later. I'm going to let Bob go on to the next slide. He's going to talk to you about number 3, which is your reach strategy.
Oh, thanks, Craig. So number 3 that we think is really important is having a reach strategy. So what we find for a lot of companies is they may craft or we may help them craft an incredible message, incredible offers, but they may only be reaching 5% of their target audience. And so that means 95% of that target audience that you have out there perhaps don't know you exist, maybe not understand your value propositions, and can't partake. So the challenge we all have is when you look at your total addressable audience, and let's say that is 30,000 companies that you could provide your services or solutions to. What we don't know is we don't know what percentage of those companies, which ones are ready to invest in your solution in 2020. So it may be 5%, it may be 10% of that market. So the key behind a reach strategy is really thinking through and say, how do I reach 100% of my target audience and do that this year or do that over a period of time? And so that's one of the really key pillars, key things I look at as we work with companies is increasing the reach. And so we're going to talk about that. increasing the reach, increasing the avenues to that target audience, because all of us have different avenues that we're working with, that we're thinking about. You may be spending a lot of time on LinkedIn. You may be spending time looking at different webinars like today for information. So there are a lot of different ways to touch and reach your audience, and you want to be able to take advantage of those through your concerted reach strategy. Number 4 is something that we've created, and this is what we call the prospect engagement roadmap. So each of you can look at your prospects today. We've got these 4 different stages. We've got creating the awareness. We've got interest is expressed. We've got to conduct discovery. Discovery is from the buyer's side. Qualification is from the seller's side. And then we need to conduct the evaluation. What we've determined is that there are a number of very valuable offers that your prospect is looking for and that you can provide. Now, the one thing that changes is really different in terms of how we think about this versus maybe how a lot of companies think about this, is we think that these offers need to help you in the sales process. They need to help your buyer become a champion for your solutions. So as an example, let's just take a couple examples on the top here. If you're trying to create awareness, maybe what your audience is looking for is a best practices checklist. Or maybe what they're looking for is a thought leadership ebook. Maybe what we would work to create with you is an explainer video so that when they come to your website, they know exactly what you do and how you do it for your clients. And so these are great examples of things that we're innovating and creating every day. Let's look at somebody that's expressed interest in your services today. So maybe what they really need is they need a buyer's guide. So a buyer's guide is just incredibly valuable, and we've created so many of these buyer's guides for our clients because if your champion doesn't understand how to go through the process of understanding what criteria is important for your services and what is the appropriate way for them to evaluate your services, they can spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time with you and perhaps with other companies. So it's great to give them a buyer's guide so they understand how to buy that solution. So this is another good example. Let's come over here to the next area, conducting discovery and qualification. We've got something over here called ROI blueprinting. So ROI blueprinting is really how do you create the ROI that your prospects are looking for? How do you determine how to create that ROI story when you're implementing your services or solutions with your clients today? So this ROI blueprinting process allows you to create the outcomes that are important for your customers, but also the validation points that are important for your prospects. Over here in this final area, conducting evaluation, you can see there are a lot of things that would be extraordinary to provide to your sales team. And so, for instance, having industry success stories is really important. Being able to have competitive battle cards so that you understand how to win against your competitors. And looking at implementation success blueprint, which is another area. So what we find a lot of times is if you can get your buyer to start thinking about how they would benefit and implement your services as opposed to how they would evaluate them, you're starting down the right path as far as them becoming a client, becoming a customer for you. So this is number 4, which is creating this provocative, integrative, and really important prospect engagement roadmap. The other reason why this is important, especially up front here, is what you want to do is you want to create educated buyers. How often is it today where you get quote unquote leads that are provided to your company and they show up for a meeting, but they don't really understand what you can do for them. They don't understand the value that they can receive. Well, these type of offers give you an opportunity to create that extraordinary value and attachment up front with your buyer. Number 5 is leveraging the right vehicle roadmap. So we talked about the vehicles, which is talking about the content, the offers. Now we've got to figure out how do you get that to your target audience. And there are a lot of different ways to do this. What we find based upon the surveys, the buyer intelligence that Craig mentioned earlier, is that your buyers are going to tell you if they're looking for your type of solution, where would they go? How would they do that? Where would they look? Who would they confide in? Who do they trust? That's just invaluable, because what you want to do is triangulate on the vehicles based upon where your audience is today. Number 6 is executing your campaigns weekly through your marketing automation system. And that's something that we've done an extraordinary job with our clients. Our team will work with our client and make sure that the campaigns, the offers go out every week, and it creates the type of velocity and the quality leads that you're looking for every day. And that's what your salespeople are really looking for. So when you think about salespeople, you think about giving them high quality leads that they can convert into customers. That's the best use of their time, and it's really what we look at is creating this engine so that you can scale. Number 7 is probably one of the most overlooked areas that we find as you're building the engine, which is once you create the tsunami of new leads for your company, who's going to convert them into sales opportunities? Is anybody following up with them today? And so that's number 7, which is really creating what we talked about, that second funnel. So the first funnel was the right offers, the right information, the right engagement with your target audience. The second is converting those interested buyers into truly sales qualified buyers, sales qualified prospects for your company. So we want to talk a little bit about this. There are a whole set of best practices that we find for lead qualification. And what we find is for a lot of companies, they don't have a So if you take all of these leads that we're talking about and you turn them over to your sales team, sometimes that's a challenge because your sales team is focused on closing business. They're focusing on opportunities that they already are working on. And so who's going to follow up on these prospects? Because these prospects, when they raise their hand, have a very short time where they're expressing interest. So they're perishable, as we talk about. Just like going to produce at the supermarket, you've got to consume them quickly. You've got to respond to them quickly. And so being able to have the number of touch points that we talk about to reach and have the persistence is important. We also find that these opportunities then are created for the sales team. Having the sales team follow up with the prospect or the buyer quickly becomes very important. So having all that information as it flows from that plumbing that Craig talked about, from a marketing automation system into your sales system, into your channel management system, that becomes just really important to be able to have that information and act on it quickly. One of our clients that we're working with today has a number of BDRs or SDRs, as we call them. And what we're doing is we're actually training them, so giving them the right scripts, helping them understand that they have the right ability with information to convert those interested buyers into sales qualified buyers. And so we're doing that. So in some cases, we're training or retraining their team. In other cases, we're helping provide that solution or service to them. So let's just recap what we talked about here today. If you're going to build your revenue growth engine for your company this year and really scale and be successful, there are 7 areas that we look at that are important. One is what Craig talked about, which is having the buyer intelligence. And that's something that almost every company we find overlooks, which is really understanding your buyer in a statistically relevant way. So from a statistical perspective, you want to be able to say, we've actually talked to 50 or 100 decision makers in our target market. We really understand them, and we understand how they're thinking so that their thoughts, their input is representative of the broader audience. You're going to implement a system of record, like a marketing automation system, so that you can look at all the buyer behavior and you can separate the wheat from the chaff in terms of who's really interested in your solutions. Number 3 is having a reach strategy and laying that out. And number 4 is this really fantastic prospect engagement roadmap that we've talked about in creating the right offers and then using the right vehicles in number 5 to reach that audience. 6 is persistence and keeping having that a discipline that says we're going to create and execute these campaigns every week, every month, every quarter, and then qualifying those interests into true opportunities for your sales organization. So that's really creating the sales and revenue growth engine for your company. And what we'd like to do now is ask our those of you attending to participate in another poll with us if you could. And we really appreciate that. So everybody comes to these webinars perhaps with different expectations. What we'd like to get from you is what's the major takeaway from today? So is your major takeaway about how to determine how to accelerate your existing sales cycles that you have today? Is it about how to build or perfect your revenue growth engine that we've talked about today? Is it about understanding your prospects better and what's important to them? Is it about creating better offers to engage your audience? Or is it doubling the number of sales leads that you currently need, that you currently have today? So it's just interesting as Craig and I worked with, as we talked about with the App Exchange, we went from 38 leads per month to over 300 leads per month. And that was a 10X. But that put them on the trajectory to go from $6.5 million company at the beginning to a $65 million company in 4 years, and then leading to what Craig talked about, which is the infusion of $250 million by Bain Capital into the company. So that's the type of growth that's possible. It's possible for your company. It's possible for you. And so thank you for participating in our poll. And let's go ahead and have another second or two, get your input, and then let's go ahead and present the information back to you. Okay. So in terms of sharing the information, what we have here, you mentioned that 33% of you attending today were interested in building or perfecting your revenue growth engine, which is phenomenal. 29% stated that understanding your prospects better and what's important to them is going to be top-notch for you. 12% stated that's creating better offers to engage your target audience. And 24% stated that doubling the number of sales leads is most important. So number 1 is building your engine. Number 2 on this list is understanding your buyers better. And number 3 is doubling the number of leads for your sales organization. So thank you very much for participating in that. Okay. So what we'd like to do right now is open this up for Q&A with our audience. We'd love to get all your questions. If we can't get to everyone's question today, then we'll make sure that we follow up with you one-on-one and address those questions. So let's go ahead and open this up. And let me look at the questions that we have today from our audience. So please go ahead and post them. Let's see. We've got a lot of great questions here, so we appreciate that. Okay, this is from Maria. It's a survey for someone, let's see, it's a survey for someone already interested in your services. Good question. So surveys, I'll answer this, and then Craig, perhaps you can address this too. Surveys are really important. What we find, first of all, is there are 2 types of surveys. There are surveys for customers, which most companies do, and there's surveys for prospects. So in many cases, what you're looking at is surveying your target audience. This would be non-customers, so that you can understand what's important to them, understand what would motivate them to consider your solutions or services. So in many cases, it's not necessarily focused on somebody who's already engaged with you. It's looking at your target stakeholders that you have to reach and involve and really understand what's important to them. But thank you for that question. Craig, what's your thoughts on this?
No, absolutely. Everything, I agree with everything you said there, Bob. So the core thing is it's for new. It's not about going to your existing base. I mean, there is a time and a place to do that, and that's for upselling and cross-selling your existing audience. And that's a different type of survey. What we're talking about here, and that's a very valuable survey, and we do those all the time. What we're talking about is understanding the market, and what we by surveying the buyers out there who are potential buyers, what you're doing is you're extrapolating up the statistical results to say, well, the market as a whole is interested in your solution because of this reason. So you're using that as a statistical projection into the marketplace.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. This question is from Bonnie. Bonnie wanted to ask, how does this relate to a services company as opposed to more of a product or solutions company? And I would say, Bonnie, that what we talked about today absolutely relates back to your company as a services company. We work with many services companies today, professional services companies, offer solutions. Let me give you an example. One of our customers is a company called ICUC. They are a global social media management services company, and they provide social media management services. They have no products, so it's all services that they provide. And their customers include people like Starbucks, Novartis, Macy's, a lot of Google, a lot of really global brands. So we've actually helped them put in their revenue growth engine, scale that, and be incredibly successful in terms of doing what we're talking about today. So everything we're talking about today really works extremely well with services companies. Now, what we've also seen is that we'll work with a lot of companies that are IT services companies, cloud services companies, or other types of services companies. And what they haven't done is they haven't productized their services so that these are repeatable services, well understood by the target audience, and understanding what the benefits are. So there are a lot of companies out there that are services companies that do a great job crafting unique services based upon unique needs. But what we're all looking for is, how do you replicate that? So when you find a great opportunity, when you find a profitable client, if you're like me, you're always thinking about, how do I find another 50 of those? Because that's really important to us. Okay, so thank you for that question, Bonnie. So let's go ahead and talk about another question here. And this question is, this is from Taylor. Taylor asked, what's the best way to calculate ROI and determine what's working? So Craig, you want to take that?
Sure, absolutely. So the key with any type of ROI is establishing, first you can look at benchmarks and establish are there any existing benchmarks out there for your specific service or industry? Sometimes there is, sometimes there is not. And then you begin, after you have your messaging down, after you have your content built, and you begin testing the markets through various types of channels, you put in place a rigorous closed loop process that evaluates your spend versus your results. Now, what you're going to have to do is measure that on a weekly, monthly, and quarterly basis so that you can basically intelligently invest and divest as your results are coming in. And is there some golden ROI number? No, because it's going to vary depending on service and industry. But you can optimize your results and extract from your results and your productivity the best that you can be and the best that you can penetrate the market with.
Thanks very much, Craig. Bonnie had another question about using Constant Contact and the challenge that Constant Contact is, like many companies out there, this would be an email engine, that they don't like lists that are not opt-in lists. And so how do you deal with that? So let me go ahead and offer some thoughts. One of the things that we do when you're working with different lists that you may find, even lists that when you go to a conference, for instance, or an opt-in list, somebody provides you an opt-in list. And what we'll often do is we'll put that through a validation engine, and like Never Bounce or Bright Verify or a validation engine, and we'll make sure that these contacts, these addresses are validated first. And we do that because we don't want to have any type of bounce rate once we start using that list with these different engines. So good question. Let me have time for one more question here. This one is from Taylor. And let's see, what's the question here? How do we determine what offers to make? So Taylor, thanks for that question. So what we find is a couple things. It's always thinking about through your buyer's eyes what's important to them. And so when we think about creating offers, it's about creating offers that and information that your buyer is looking for. So if you think about it, the survey, the buyer intelligence survey that we talked about earlier that Craig went through, that's a really great way to triangulate on what's important to your buyer. A second thing that I look at with many of our clients is what are the sales tools that your sales team needs? So for instance, if you're going through the sales process and you don't have success stories that demonstrate ROI, that may impede those opportunities from closing. So what we look at is what's missing in the sales process that's important to your buyer, and how do you create those opportunities, those assets, if you will, so that it's going to help you flawlessly execute the sales and buying process. So thank you, everyone, for those questions. Appreciate all questions. And if we didn't get to your question today, I'll make sure that I follow up with you one-on-one. What we're going to do is really talk about some next steps. Some next steps that you can take today, meaningful steps as you're thinking about putting in place your revenue growth engine for your company. First of all, we'll be following up with everybody that has attended our webinar today. And if you'd like to have an appointment with us and see a specific example, so for instance, if you want to see an actual buyer intelligence survey, want to see a sales-driven website, or if you'd like to see a prospect engagement roadmap, we're happy to show that to you. And we'll just opt in, let us know that's important, and we'll set up a time to review that with you. We also will be providing every one of you a copy of today's webinar recording in case you want to share that with other stakeholders within your company. And one of the other things that we created for this year is the Chief Revenue Officer Success Playbook for 2020. So if you'd like to see that and see what's in the playbook and how you take those best practices applied for your company, let us know that. We're also going to be providing a copy of our revenue acceleration map. And so you can see what goes into the engine. And of course, there's a lot that goes into the engine, but once it's in place, you get the outcomes and the growth and the certainty and predictability you're looking for today. One final thing that I'd offer up for everybody joining today is that we've got some upcoming webinars in June for next month. The next one that we have coming up is 5 ways to drive significant revenue growth with your customers. So as opposed to getting new customers, this is what do you do with your existing customers? So a lot of executives are looking at how to increase wallet share with their existing customers. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to actually walk through some very specific examples on how that is being done today. We also have 2 more webinars coming up in June, and these are all posted on our website, so under the event section. So go ahead and register and join us for that. One is a recalibrating the company, 6 ways to increase revenue, profit, and flexibility now. And finally, we will come on. Former companies are looking at moving to remote employees. How do you excel in this post-COVID-19 world? So we're going to have a webinar on that because we've been doing this with our model for since day one. But for a lot of you that are looking at having remote employees, either work part-time or totally from home or some other remote location, how do you still get the performance and outcome that you're looking for from all these employees? So we're going to talk about that too. So again, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. It's been a pleasure having you participate with us. On behalf of Craig, myself, and the entire On-Demand Advisors team, we'd like to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having a very prosperous and growth-oriented 2020 with you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.